Good afternoon. Hi, we'll get started. My name is Lakshmi Clark. I work in the Dean of Students office. I'm very happy to see all of you here this afternoon. Welcome to the event. So October is National Disability Awareness, Employment Awareness Month, and we're really excited to welcome back Kristin Fleschner. She is an alum of 2014. She's worked on gender, peace, and security issues for the federal government since 2008. Kristin recently joined the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor as a Foreign Affairs Officer covering human rights issues. She's a 2004 graduate of HLS and a 2004 graduate of Vanderbilt. She was a 2004 Vanderbilt University Michael B. Keegan Traveling Fellow. And before joining the federal government in 2008, she worked for the Polaris Project, Younger Women's Task Force, Population Services International, and former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. I'm personally so excited to see Kristin, and welcome.
Thank you. I want to take a moment just to thank Lakshmi and HLS for hosting me today. I'm really excited to be back here. I think it's almost strange that I'm so excited and have such great feelings about HLS because when I came to HLS, I started losing my vision and I started using a cane and using JAWS and all of the things that you use when you start losing your vision. So a lot of people going through that transition might have a lot of negative feelings, but I had such great support from Harvard that I have probably the most positive feelings in my life when I think about Harvard and vision loss. So I think that says a lot about Harvard. So I really appreciate the support and all of the positive feelings that I have when I come back here. So I'm really grateful for the support that I had and for the opportunity to come back and speak with all of you today. I dream of a world where we can open the dictionary and the word disabled no longer exists. We have eliminated it through universal design. We have the opportunity to build a physically welcoming world to all individuals. And I'm going to tell you why I'm counting on all of you to help me reach my dream. I was fortunate to be raised by parents that gave me a few qualities they had no idea I would rely on in the way that I have. They nurtured the ability to believe, to have hope, and confidence in myself, no matter what label was slapped on me. Whether it was a blind woman, a bossy woman, or, better yet, a blind, bossy, self-righteous woman, which I have actually been called just for telling someone not to open the door for me because I was blind. I never had the thump in my chest that my dreams wouldn't come true. It's funny though, you'll see in the film that my parents almost lost hope themselves. It's often harder when you aren't the one facing the challenge. But they had already planted the belief deep in my soul. And when they doubted what I could do, I was busy explaining to my mom the technology that I was using to write law school papers so she could help me proof them. Or I was teaching my dad how he was going to be my guide in a marathon. Adversity isn't an obstacle that we need to get around. It's just a part of our life. And that was the goal of the documentary, to help prepare others to meet it well, to show others that you can adapt, and you can adapt well. All of you will face adversity. It actually could be blindness. It may be the loss of a parent or even a child. But we must all face it with the same tools, the ability to believe and to hope. It's extraordinary how far belief and hope can take you. If you begin to look at adversity and obstacles as opportunities to grow and adapt, then you have more riches than the person who has never faced a challenge. This was the goal of the documentary, and I hope that you see hope and resilience when you meet people with disabilities. not pity or shallow inspiration. So every October, people with disabilities come together across the United States to celebrate National Employment with Disability Month. And what you see in the documentary are 3 blind students who are privileged to be at Harvard, getting the accommodations that they need to succeed. Even at Harvard, where we had full monetary resources and support, I'll admit, and I think Harvard will admit, that there were times it was still very hard. We still had midnight phone calls during exams where there were materials that weren't ready. But we worked very hard to make it better for the next students. And I think there are some people here that will say that we did make it better. Many students across the U.S. aren't getting the resources that Harvard students are getting. And we can be honest, this is probably for 2 reasons. The main reason is because Harvard has the money and the resources to fully implement disability services. But it's not just the money, it's the attitude. They have made the choice to make this a priority. The money could go to other places, but it doesn't. They ensure that their students with disabilities are supported, and they should be. This is the law. We all know that. And just to be clear, accommodations don't always cost that much. This has been proven by research. Harvard goes above and beyond, allowing students to test new devices to see if they can improve their learning, using readers if needed, and even providing transportation around campus if that's required. This isn't normal at most schools. They are invested in helping their students succeed because they know that students with disabilities bring a unique perspective to the classroom, one that helps other students grow and learn. As we move towards universal design in education, we have the responsibility to create a learning environment that are naturally accessible, where fewer accommodations are needed. For example, if a university is designing online classes, they should be accessible to everyone. Captions, audio descriptions would all be built in, and people with mobility issues wouldn't have to have the struggles of getting to class. Some might immediately think that an online class is impossible for a blind student, but it's actually the opposite. We're teaching developers that they must envision online classrooms to be like a brick and mortar classroom. If the screen reader or captions don't work throughout the entire online class, it's like building a class without a ramp for a person with a wheelchair. It's not accessible to everyone. The designers are starting to get it and are building beautiful classes for everyone, not just disabled persons. And they must. It's the law. It was a privilege to be at Harvard, and I knew that when I left, I would likely be entering a workforce where I wouldn't have the same support that I received in the classroom. I was prepared for this. And workers across the U.S. are struggling more than students. All of this is despite the protections of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 and 508, which make massive improvements in hiring and workplace accommodations for people with disabilities. Despite these improvements, a 2016 Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that 8 out of 10 people with disabilities do not have jobs. That's 8 out of 10 people with disabilities don't have jobs. And because of this, nearly 1 in 3 Americans with disabilities live in poverty. That's a huge number. 1 in 3 Americans with disabilities live in poverty. That statistic keeps me awake at night. The study showed that the workplace is more stressful for people with disabilities, to the point that it's harmful to their health. Many of the employees interviewed were capable of performing their jobs. That wasn't the problem. It was stress around asking for accommodations or asking for promotions and discussing how they would be compared to their colleagues who were not receiving accommodations. Even more stressful is managing health issues at work. including doctor's appointments and doing such things as changing colostomy bags or taking injections or performing any needed medical task, because there aren't accommodations for personal medical care in the workplace. Let me give you a personal example, if that's okay. I have a friend who's a quadriplegic, and he's a lawyer. He's a pretty exceptional lawyer and an exceptional man. He actually went to Duke Law, and he broke his neck in a swimming accident while he was there. He has an excellent job with the federal government, the place where you go to get the best accommodations if you have a disability. To get to work, he takes the metro in DC, where he has to wait for someone to come along and push the elevator button for him, since he can't push it himself. This is after he's waited for the local paratransit service to come and pick him up and take him to the metro. He communicates by using a phone that's propped to the front of his wheelchair to type, which he does through a device that's placed in his mouth in order to make contact with the touchscreen on his phone through the mouthpiece. He's able to use this device at work for emails and writing as an accommodation. However, the accommodation of a personal assistant can only be used for work purposes during the workday. So he doesn't have a personal care assistant for personal tasks like eating or going to the bathroom. So that's not deemed a reasonable accommodation of the workplace. Typically, my friend doesn't eat during the workday unless a colleague asks to help lift his fork or spoon for him. This is the same with the bathroom. I would personally call this a pretty stressful workday, but he takes it all in stride and seems to love his job and is grateful that he has work that he enjoys. He is also good at what he does and is clearly respected within his agency. You might be feeling anger in your gut right now. I did when I heard about this and imagined my friend missing lunches or going to team lunch meetings and not being able to eat. But without the ADA, this exceptional person would not have graduated from Duke Law after his accident, or he wouldn't have a job with the federal government at all. In many ways, he's a huge success story for the disabled community. But he also shows how far we have to come. At the very basic level, we can criticize the paratransit system because we should have designed a system that is more accessible to disabled customers. The buttons on the elevator should be designed so it opens when someone arrives, or there should be no elevators at all when accessing the train system. That's universal design at the basic level. That's an easy answer. The accommodations at the workplace should be more forgiving and recognize that if someone is going to do any work, let alone exceptional work, there should be flexibility to determine accommodations on a case-by-case basis. Quadriplegic, like everyone else, needs fuel for brain power. Like any other employee, they deserve to eat like you're doing now. That's reasonable. We have a chance to change this. In this election cycle, people with disabilities are the biggest minority. We are 1 in 5 voters. And if we vote, this will help put smarter politicians in office that will consider policies that will incorporate universal design when writing laws about our schools, hiring federal employees, and building our cities. Now is the time for people to speak out about our disabilities because we need allies to vote with us more than ever. And in the app world, where technology is opening doors every day for people with disabilities, from getting groceries to getting rides, the disabled are 1 billion users strong. That's 1 billion, larger than any other group. So this is why universal design is so important. For too long, our community has been silenced or unheard, and many developers and leaders don't know about us. They don't necessarily know our laws and our voices. So many advocates, including myself, are focusing on education the laws are there. And we've obviously had good cases that I'm sure many of you are aware of. But through documentaries, speaking engagements, and social media, we are focusing on education now. Many of you know that Zoe, my C9 doc, has a Facebook page with thousands of followers. And we're doing a whole presentation on internet advocacy today at 4 o'clock if you want to come and learn more. But in short form, be our ally. When you see an entrance that isn't accessible or bathroom, tweet. When you see a company, even HLS, that isn't posting descriptions, make a comment and describe them so they know what they should be doing. If you see people out in public petting guide dogs, tell them what to do, say no so they know what to do and they know that they shouldn't be doing it. Insist that we are building a world where the universe is accessible to everyone. This is in your hands. And remember, we will all face challenges. You don't need eyes to see, you need a vision, belief, and hope to overcome whatever you will face. And with that, we will be able to end unwanted stereotypes and create a physically welcoming world. So I think now we're going to take a few minutes to watch the documentary that I made with the Harvard Doc Studio when I was at UL. And then after that, it's about 14 minutes long, I think. And then after that, I can take some questions if we have time. I think we will have time. So I can take questions. I can't see hands. So I don't know. Sometimes I have people come up, but that's also not the most inclusive way. So Lakshmi, I don't know if you want to manage questions. I don't know if we can turn off this screen. Also not the best for my eyes.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
They told me to press image mute. Oh, there we go. Okay. Are there any questions for Kristin? Yes, Shania.
So you said at the beginning of your talk that you wanted to, in the future, open the dictionary and see the word disability not there.
Yes.
Do you have?
I know where you're going with this
Do you
question.
have any ideas about sort of what or how you would like to talk about people with different abilities?
Yeah, I thought you were going in a slightly different way, but yeah. So I had a longer version of the speech that I had to cut. I actually like the word disability and prefer using that word. And on Zoe's Facebook page, I use the word disability all the time, and people are constantly correcting me and telling me not to use the word disability. And I guess in the talk, when I said I was wanting to get rid of the word disability, I meant in the sense just so we don't have to be put, or we aren't being confined by the way that society is forcing us to be confined. But if we want to be put in that group because we're proud to be in that group, then that's different. And I'm proud to be in that group, and I prefer to be identified as a blind person and a disabled person. And so I think that if we want to keep that word in the dictionary for those reasons, then that's very different. But I think, I was trying to get at getting rid of the issues around disability because, as Sarah was saying at the end of the documentary, we aren't disabled because of the disability itself, but because of the things that society has put around us that make us disabled, if that makes sense. Does that get at what you're asking?
Yeah, I think
Kind
so.
of.
Thanks.
Are there other questions or comments?
Kyle.
Sure. I was just curious, so you had your experience in the academic world and how disability services helped you with that stuff. You have your stuff in your job,
Mm-hmm.
in your work world,
Yeah.
and how those compare. And then obviously in public life, you know, when you're getting around, maybe you gave the Metro Boston, DC is the example
Yeah.
of things. So, those three worlds are very different on how they handle those things. I was
Yeah.
wondering if you had any comment on
Yeah.
that.
Yes. I found that here at Harvard, like I said, there were challenges, but Harvard was very responsive. And when we identified a challenge, they were very quick to address them. And even if we couldn't fix something, we worked very hard to do it. And that was very gratifying to me. And we were pretty close to fixing everything. Like, the things that we didn't fix were pretty much out of our hands, like LexisNexis and things like that. So things were really great here. And in the federal government, like I said in my talk, that's kind of the place that you go if you want to get pretty good accommodations. So I've been pretty blessed. I've been on rotation to several different places in the government, so I've had varying experiences. And I would say at State Department, they have really great resources for people who are visually impaired because the people who provide accommodations have visual impairments. But it really varies depending on the agency, and there's a lot of variation. And it also depends on where you are. I've traveled a lot, and if you're overseas, it can be pretty challenging. So that has been a challenge to do some overseas travel. But it's also been very gratifying because being in embassies and interacting with local staff members in embassies who have never seen a blind person, because in some of the places that I've traveled to, blind people work in warehouses and aren't even allowed out of warehouses. I was able to discuss that with foreign ministers who were very excited that I was traveling and wanted to know how they could get blind people out of warehouses and into universities, but they were just shocked that I was there and had attended Harvard. So that was an interesting experience. But to get back to your question, I think one of the problems with the federal government, despite getting good accommodations, is that the system moves very slowly. And so if there is a problem, for example, if a screen reader doesn't work, for example, at an agency, having to overhaul that program doesn't take a year or 2 years. It can take 5 or 6 years or longer. And that's even if there's goodwill and, all sorts of things. So the bureaucracy is a huge hurdle for the federal government. As far as DC and Boston goes, I've been fortunate to live in cities, and that's really helpful. I also just spent a lot of time in Indiana, where I wasn't in a city and didn't have public transportation, and so that was a big difference, and that was really hard. It was my first time to not have public transportation or really Uber or taxi, and so it was limited to my parents. And so I was really not independent for the first time. So, being able to be in a big city around a metro and other services like Metro Access, which is a paratransit service, is extremely beneficial. So I've been fortunate in that way, and also having Zoe, who is my car basically. She walks miles every day. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you are comfortable, can you share with us the cause of your vision loss? And
Yeah.
did you have any idea that you would lose your vision at some point?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I had type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed when I was 13, and when I was 25, I decided to have an organ transplant. I had a pancreas transplant, and I didn't have any complications from diabetes at the time. And about a year after transplant, I started experiencing vision loss that they couldn't really figure out why. It was both retinopathy and glaucoma, but not necessarily related to the diabetes, but it was treated and should have responded in the way that someone that has diabetes would. But it didn't respond. I mean, it didn't respond appropriately. And they thought that it could have some relation to the immunosuppression, or my body just never responded in the way that it should have. So they aren't really sure why the vision loss occurred.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Emily? Okay, Christina.
Okay, I was just, like, if you could snap your fingers and like make one disability law to like, further develop the best design, or do you think that laws are no longer the best vehicle for what would be your vision?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. I mean, we kind of have the laws, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the issue, and that's one of the reasons that I've really focused on education. And it's I think it's a cultural issue now, and really trying to get people to understand what the laws are. And then at some point, you do have to file the lawsuit. And, like what happened with Uber and the guide dog issue last year. I don't know if everyone's aware of that case, but like Uber has been refusing guide dogs and said that the ADA didn't apply to them. And it's a cultural issue where people don't know about the laws and they refuse it, and then finally, you actually have to say, yes, it does. This law does apply to you. So I think in a lot of ways the laws are there, and it is an education issue, and that's why I think a lot of us are focusing on education and doing documentaries and all of the social media. The universal design is a little bit different, and I think there are some ways that we could improve laws around universal design, because the internet is a little bit different and it's still a little bit fuzzy. And so I think there could be improvement on some of the laws around universal access in the internet. So I think there could be improvement in that area.
So it's about 5 to 1. We'll take one more question. Christine, I think you had your hand up.
Sure. So you mentioned that you started to lose your vision in law school. What resources did you find most helpful in making the adjustment?
Yeah. So when I came here, I knew that I was losing my vision. Actually stopped driving my last day of work and gave my parents my keys when they packed my car and came here, and started using a cane my first day in Boston. And told Harvard that when I came. And so I came 2 weeks or 3 weeks early and did a lot of mobility training, and did a lot of JAWS training, screen reading training, and also went to the Apple store a lot, and they do free accessibility training. So I was able to use both Apple and, or use both a Mac and a screen reader. And then obviously went to the CNI and got Zoe. And I think it was a combination of having the independence and the technology. And I utilized Perkins as well while I was here. Some of their different workshops, I went and learned how to take pictures, which seems silly, but I wanted to be on social media and be able to take pictures on my camera. And then also did the documentary. So just little things like that. And Harvard was very supportive, and they actually supported my mobility training and cane training. And doing the JAWS, the screen reading training, was obviously vital. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do the all of my reading for law school. And then I also went to a lot of conferences. I went to the National Federation of Blind Conference, and I went to a conference at American University, and meeting other blind students and being connected with the blind community was one of the most important things that happened to me, because it is a really strong community, and I learned so much from the other students, and they gave me a lot of confidence. And I learned that there were blind chemists and 10 billion blind lawyers. There are so many blind lawyers, it's scary. I mean, there are more blind lawyers than I think blind people in any other profession, and that was really powerful.
So I think there is a class
Okay.
around. Thank you so much all.
Thanks for coming.